You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I am your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we assign our guests a year and we choose one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year for us to talk about. No guests today, which means I assigned you the year, kind of. I made you pick, sort of.
Yeah, we are going back to the 70s because our guests very rarely ever want to go to the 70s. So we needed to hit the 70s at some point soon because I think it's been a while.
Yeah, I think the last time was that with Groupie? When we did the Blondie episode?
I think it was.
Because I don't think that Cramps record, that was like the 1980 record.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a minute since we've hit the 70s. Which, you know, it's good for us because we've covered the 70s a lot. Because there's actually a lot less to choose from, you know. Punk doesn't really... We always started with 76 as our year, but even then, like, there's not that many punk records in 76. So, like...
Yeah, I mean, looking at... If this is your first time listening, we do use the Rate Your Music charts to draw from. So if you're looking at Rate Your Music, they have 6 pages of punk records for the year that we're talking about this year. So there's not a lot. There's not... And then it gets real obscure real fast. Mm-hmm. That's the other big problem with the 70s.
Yeah, we chalk that up to it's a new genre. There's not that many bands doing it. Plus, you know, everybody released records pretty much had to release them through record labels during this era. So, like, there's very few, you know, it wouldn't be until, like, really the internet that you really get an influx of independently released, you know, DIY releases. There is independent music, of course, but... it's not on the degree that it becomes later. So it kind of limits your choices to pull from. And there are some things that we were like, I don't know. Somebody might actually choose that one day. You know, the idea is that we're going to do this show until, you know, we don't want to anymore. So.
Yeah, there's pretty unlimited supply of records to talk about.
Yeah.
So we can just go forever.
Yeah, and so, like, we try, whenever it's just us, we try and pick stuff that we're like, is a guest likely to pick that? Probably not.
Yeah.
So, before we get into that,
yeah,
let's do some plugs. So, if you head on over to the Patreon, we, for $1, you get access to all of our bonus audio. That is patreon.com/punklautopod. And this week over there, we are doing a starting 5 on the year 1979. And if you're unfamiliar with that, that is where we each choose 5 records from this year to talk about. So it's albums that we each chose, listened to, refreshed ourselves on, you know, and we talked about them. That's fun over there. There's also the $10 tier where you get to choose what album we talk about on the show. Those have been really fun. We just did one for Dave Brown, One Band, 5 Songs fame. And then we have another one coming up soon with my co-host from Around the Ring. But, yeah, head over to Patreon. That's where all that's at. That tier is $10. I don't know if I mentioned that, but here it is, $10. We have all the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're at Punk Lotto Pod on all of those. We have a voicemail line. It's 202-688-PUNK. So it's that time of year. Start calling in and leaving in your voicemails on what your favorite records of the year are. And then we'll play them on our best of episode at the end of the year. We have an email. It's punklautopod@gmail.com. And a Substack. punklautopod.substack.com. I hate that they do theirs opposite order of everyone else.
Yeah, that's all the plugs. I was just thinking, it's funny, we did this show by ourselves for so long and like kind of like had that template of the show that we then had to kind of modify. And then now whenever we do episodes with no guests, we don't know what we're doing at all.
Yeah, we're thrown
just, like, completely out of order.
Yeah, like we were about to start talking about the year before we'd done anything else. Any housekeeping out of the way. But, yeah, all that good stuff. Okay, so, yeah, the way we normally do intro it is we even tell you what we're talking about. So I guess you know what it is. You can read. It's in the show description. It's in the title of the episode, so we'll save that. This episode, we chose the year 1979 because it's one we haven't repeated as much as the others. That was kind of our deciding.
Yeah, it was, what year has not been hit too often or too recently? Yeah, and then you said up top, we picked a record that our guests are not likely to pick, or at least we don't think they're going to be high on anyone's priority list. There's, we could be surprised, but it's not the most obscure thing we could have found.
No.
But we can take a look at the year and what else came out and talk briefly about the big records that our guests are more likely to pick.
Yeah.
The records that people want to talk about and hear about. And then maybe just kind of a general overview of what else was happening. What else was under the punk umbrella.
Yeah, so we've definitely done this part where we talked about what else came out in 1979. But just for context's sake, in case you do not remember off the top of your head what that year featured, iconic records, of course, being Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures. The more we get away from, I don't know if this is the right way to word it, the more I hear of New Order, the less I care about Joy Division. And they were already a band that I was not like super high on. It could be a hot take to say New Order's better than Joy Division, but I think it's true.
I 100% agree with you. I understand the significance of Joy Division, in particular this record. I think it's a good record, but I say that with my that tone of voice of like, yeah, it's a good record. That is immediately followed by a but. I don't care about it.
Yeah.
I'm really not invested in it. If there's an overrated punk record from 1979 that I'm gonna listen to and talk about and like actually say like is a great record, it's London Calling by The Clash.
It's a good record, but it's way too long.
It's too long and it could be way better. Like if you actually just picked like the 10 or 12 best songs from that record, which you could easily do, like there's amazing songs on here, and condensed it, boiled it down to just those songs, perfect record. Just flawless. Like, I mean, it would deserve all of the hype that it gets as being one of the best punk records ever made. There's plenty, and I mean, like I know that like its length and like kind of the aside material, the kind of like genre exercises that they do on some of these songs are like part of what makes it the special record that it is, but that's what Sandinista is. Well, you don't need two of these records back to back.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about The Clash. 79 is Talking Heads' Fear of Music, which is the critic music snobs pick for the best Talking Heads record. I think you like it a lot, don't you?
I don't know why you hate Fear of Music so much, but it's a great record. It's way better than Remain in Light, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Remain in Light is too much of that. What do they call it?
David Byrne?
Yeah, right. I don't know if anyone has seen the IFC series documentary now, but they did an excellent parody of Stop Making Sense, where one of the main guy is like a David Byrne type, personality, and then the bass player is just this forever like shit upon member of the band, and there's a sequence in it where it's like, then we did the record with the Tibetan monks and and then they cut to Bill Hader's character, who's the bass player, and he's like, yeah, I didn't like that era of the band. Like, he just did not. And I was always like, yep, that's the Remain in Light era that they're talking about. Fear of Music is also like the beginning of that. So maybe I think that's why I'm like, I don't want to go to this era. But yeah, there's Cities, Life During Wartime. I mean, this is way better than Remain in Light.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take Izimbra even. Like, it is rough to start on Izimbra, though. You're kind of just like, you put that record on and you're like, what is this? What is this record gonna be? Yeah, but I mean, cities, life during wartime, air, heaven, drugs, even. I don't know. Like, I think it's a really enjoyable record.
Yeah. I like pop Talking Heads more. I like their sellout material. No, More Songs About Billions of Food is my favorite record, but I do love Speaking in Tongues and Little Creatures, so I like those better than Fear and Music. I don't know. I gotta re-listen to Fear and Music.
Yeah, Talking Heads would be a great best worst over under band.
Yeah, they would. That would be, oh yeah, because we'd have a lot of different opinions too. Cool. Gang of Four's Entertainment came out that year. Super critically acclaimed, very beloved record. I feel like it's still not as well known as it should be, because this record is great.
Great record. Better than Fear of Music.
Out of these top 4, it's the best.
Oh yeah, for sure. Disco beats, anti-solos, catchy hooks. Great record.
Mm-hmm. The Cure's Three Imaginary Boys. Some records I'm just less familiar with. Wires 154. XTC's Drums and Wires. B-52 self-titled. So, there's some well-known records on this list. Let's say... So, whenever we chose, our starting 5 stuff, we also, chose a bunch of extra stuff to kind of, filter through and decide if, we're going to talk about them on that Patreon. One of the records that was on my maybe list was The Falls live at the Witch Trials. And I also even was going to I was considering Dragnet as well, too. I didn't get enough time to listen to those to really be, comfortable enough to pick them to talk about for that.
Yeah, I was looking at it, and I saw that those fall records were on there, and I disqualified them on the grounds that I wanted to be able to listen to both to be able to decide which of the two I would talk about if I were to pick it, and I just didn't think that I was going to have the time to commit to 2 fall records. I have heard both of these records, at least either in full or in considerable chunks. So I generally know what they're about and what they sound like, and they're both really good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can't weigh in on which one I prefer over the other.
No, I can't either.
Not without spending some time with them.
Yeah, other records on here, GI by the Germs, which we've covered before. Inflammable Material by Stiff Little Fingers.
Machine Gun Etiquette by the Damned. Yeah, records that we've talked about pretty extensively.
Mm-hmm.
I very easily could have put Look Sharp by Joe Jackson on my starting 5. I love that record. I do think that's a record that someone might pick, though. So I wanted to kind of preserve it.
Who do you think's going to pick that?
I don't know.
Who's a Joe
Probably
Jackson
not,
fan?
Probably not anybody. It's a iconic record. I don't know. I feel like someone's going to pick it.
Is that on this page? Oh, Look Sharp. There it is. Okay. I don't know what it even sounds like. What's a Joe Jackson song? What's his most famous Joe Jackson song?
It's probably on here. Got the time, tick, tick, ticking in my head. You know that song.
Do I? I don't recognize that song.
Oh, you should listen to that record.
Who's a Joe Jackson? Who am I thinking Joe Jackson is? Am I thinking Joe Jackson's someone else?
I think you're thinking of Joe Jackson.
Who's the blues guy?
He pretty much immediately stopped doing this. And I think a lot of his later stuff is just piano rock.
Does he turn into kind of a John Mellencamp sort of guy?
I don't know. He's
That's what I'm saying.
British.
Who am I thinking of?
I don't think that's...
Who's are there other famous Joes that are trying to do Springsteen? I don't know.
I think Joe Jackson went more in a sophistopop direction. So anyway, here's a record I can spend a little bit of time on that I very nearly picked for my starting 5. It's Wave by Patti Smith, her 4th record, and yeah, 3rd Patti Smith group record, but that's not counting her first record, which is under her own name. Great record. Really, really good. I think it might be, it's not her best, but it could be her best. I think most people prefer Easter in her discography, and I don't think I actually do. we talked about Radio Ethiopia on the show in the past, and my appreciation for that record has only grown since we talked about it. I would put Wave pretty close with that record. It does a lot of similar things in terms of like the more extreme sounds. This record's intense. Wave is very, very intense. But I mean, it's got, classic Patti Smith rock and roll. I love that she can do that. She's like, you think of her as being like this like poet and like, being like a huge inspiration for like no wave and things like that. And just being this kind of like quasi hippie spectral being.
Yeah.
But she also has just like, so you want to be a rock and roll star. I mean, she just has like fucking kick-ass rock songs.
Yeah. This is also, speaking of records that we've done, Susie and the Banshees join hands. We talked about that on our Best Worst Over Under with Anne. It's so funny because, like, we spent the better part of a year avoiding saying anything about Susie and the Banshees. Anytime they ever popped up on, like, our listens or, like, on a chart, we were just like, and that record came out, and moving on. And, like, because we were like, save it. We're saving it. So in the future, next time, whenever there's maybe, like, a really big band and we're skipping it consistently, that might be a clue that we may be doing something with that in the future. But not to spoil that episode, but this is the second Susie and the Banshees record, and it falls under something that you'd call a sophomore slump, but it's still a really good record. Like, there's no bad Susie and the Banshees records.
Yeah, I don't know. What else do we have? Do we...
Yeah, we've like something else we previously covered. We did Buzzcock's Different Kind of Tension. Is there anything else on here that we've previously covered?
We talked about the UK subs record from this year.
Yeah, the Another Kind of Blues. And then, yeah, I think that's it. You go to that second page and you're like, oh, yeah, it's still 70s punk. So, yeah, we had a couple things that we were, like, considering talking about. And so, like, I had a few that I selected to be like, I want to talk about that. And then I listened to it and I was like, I don't really want to talk about that. Not that they weren't good. But I listened to a lot of records to eliminate some stuff. One that I listened to that I was like, this might get the pick. And it is Pat Benatar's 1979 album, but I have the picture saved on my phone and it's way too small to read, so I'm going to have to go pull that up over here on Spotify to give you the title. In the Heat of the Night, 1979 album. She's not there yet. I think that's why ultimately I didn't choose it. I was like, there's some cool stuff on here, but it's lacking some of the hooks that like her later records would really have. I think she probably takes off a little more. I mean, it's her very first record, so it makes sense. Yeah, I think
an early drawing for my starting five included ELO's Discovery, which ultimately got bumped because of other things that I listened to afterwards. But great record, really catchy hooks. 79 is not short on hooks.
Yeah. But it's funny, I remember, didn't we go like real deep on these charts individually? And we're like, this year's not as good as you think it is.
No, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, and that's pretty common with the 70s and early 80s when you're looking at the punk charts in particular. It's just like really big banner marquee records and then like stuff you've never, ever heard of and will never hear because the only way you can hear it is if you have it on vinyl. And like if you found it, it would be like one of 50 copies.
I had some other stuff that probably falls outside the umbrella of punk, so I wasn't really going to talk too much about those.
Yeah.
But there is one that you could kind of say it's kind of tangential, and it is Roxy Music's album from 79. You texted me and said, this sounds like the Home Improvement theme song, commercial song.
The Home Depot.
Yeah. Manifesto is the name of the album. I listened to that record too. Roxy Music would be another good one.
Yeah.
To dive on the discography because there's a lot there and I'm not that familiar with that much of it.
I listened to that. Yeah, I listened to that Roxy Music record. I think I like the Roxy Music records that most people don't prefer because I enjoyed that record. I thought it was really good.
I liked it too. People don't like that one? Is that a weird one?
It's just kind of like sort of lower rated, I think.
It's funny, like Roxy Music is almost more famous for their like album covers than their records, and then it's like their best records are not the ones with those like album covers. It's like the other ones with kind of normal-ish covers that are like stronger. I don't know how many I've listened to by them, but I've listened to at least 4 or 5 albums, and I like them all. And I even listened to like there's a Brian Ferry solo record that I listened to at one point, and I was like, this is good too. He's still alive too, right? Like why is Brian Ferry not around anymore? Is he? And I just don't know it. Well, he put out a record in 2018, so I guess he is, and I just didn't pay attention. Brian Ferry and his orchestra. Ooh, did he go to jazz? I think he did. That's why. Yeah, that 2018 album is called British Dance Band, subgenres Dixieland and swing. So, yeah, that's why I don't listen to Brian Ferry.
Yeah. The only other thing I could briefly talk about from 79, I feel like, is the first solo Tom Verlaine record. I think I've talked a little bit about some of Tom Verlaine's solo stuff in the past, so I'll just simply reiterate my previous point that if you were crying about no more television records, I don't know why you're not listening to the Tom Verlaine records that came out immediately after, because they sound like television. It's his voice, his guitar playing. I don't know what else you want.
Is the Jesus and Mary Chain an accurate extension of Echo and the Bunnymen sound? I've always pondered.
That joke in High Fidelity doesn't really make sense if you actually are familiar. Like, you can kind of see it, but like, yeah, an Echo fan is not necessarily a Jesus and Mary Chain fan.
But yes, let's get on to the record we actually chose. I think I made you make the final pick on this one. So we are talking about The Undertones by The Undertones.
She was mine, she looked so good. I wanna hold her tight. Get teenage kicks right through the night. I'm gonna call her on the telephone. Have her over 'cause I'm all alone. I need excitement, oh I need it bad. And it's the best I've ever had. I wanna hold her tight. Get teenage kicks right through.
For you. So, the Undertones are from Derry, Northern Ireland. They formed in 1974. This was released on May 13th, 1979 on Sire Records. This is their debut full-length album. It was recorded at Eden Studios in Action, West London, which is where The Jam recorded All Mod Cons. The Buzzcocks recorded A Different Kind of Tension. Madness recorded One Step Beyond. Echo and the Bunnymen recorded Crocodiles. And going way up in the future, The Killers recorded Hot Fuzz, which now explains why that Vegas band sounds like a UK new wave band. But like in 79, we have Buzzcocks, Madness, and the Undertones all recording records in the same studio. Madness. Pun intended. The person on this record is Fergal Sharkey on vocals, John O'Neill on rhythm guitar, Damien O'Neill on lead guitar and keys, Michael Bradley on bass, and Bill Doherty on drums. The record was produced by Roger Bachirian, that's the closest I could get, who would later work with Elvis Costello, Nick Lowe, and Squeeze, which now explains why all those bands sound the same.
Well, I mean, Elvis Costello and Nick Lowe, that's as discussed on the Patreon. What were you going to say?
So what made you choose this record?
It seemed very specific to the time. It felt like to me a record that is very, it kind of just illuminates that difference between got called punk and what got called power pop, you know, in the late 70s. And like, I think where new wave comes from, the Undertones as a band, like sonically, they fall into that category of bands that are punk adjacent, but are never really truly considered punk. And they just very much carry the legacy of, or kind of the sound of 60s garage rock and just kind of early rock and roll, I feel like. So, you know, sonically, I think maybe like the best stateside comparison is the Ramones.
Oh, well, no doubt they were hugely influenced by the Ramones. They even, I'll save that for a little bit later. But like, yeah, there's a ton of Ramones influence on their sound.
And I think more so than most UK punk bands.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's pretty accurate. And even like the ones that had a little bit more Ramones influence kind of drop it. By 79 have definitely dropped it. Because it's funny, this is a 79 record. And it definitely feels like a 77 like record to me.
Yeah, so I think that has a lot to do with when they started. They started in 75. Teenage Kicks came out in 78. I think that they were just kind of like a slow-moving band.
Well, they're from Northern Ireland, too.
And yeah, so like a lot of what they put on their debut record, I'm sure they had been working on for 3-4 years.
Yeah, so they've been
this point.
They've been playing a lot of these songs live since 1977. So like they had these songs ready. They were good to go. I mean, I assume, you know, being from Northern Ireland during the Troubles, it's probably the same reason why the Stiff Little Fingers didn't put their first record out until 79 too. So it makes sense. Also, too, though, like the fact that they are doing a sound that most of London has already kind of moved on past, you know, beyond, gives them an edge, too. It gives them this little bit of a, like, hell yeah, like, lane's wide open for our specific sound, you know? Prior to choosing them for us to talk about on the show this week, what was your, like, kind of, like, knowledge or, like, opinions on the Undertones before listening to this record?
Yeah, I mean, like I knew basically what they sounded like. I kind of categorized them as being a really important, unimportant band. Like a band that's definitely like you're gonna impress someone by playing this record for them. You're to make more high fidelity references. Your dick playing Stiff Little Fingers for someone. You know, you're kind of just like. Well, actually, there was this Northern Irish band that did a similar thing, and like it. Yeah, I mean, I had listened to this record previously. Just kind of like thought the album cover looked cool. Figured it was the right time period for this kind of stuff. I think probably the first time I listened to it, I was doing a lot of late 70s, like early punk stuff. But yeah, otherwise they didn't become like a band that I listened to regularly. Just knew what they were about. So
the first time I ever heard the Undertones, I didn't actually know it was the Undertones. So some clarification on that. When I went to college, it was my first time having high-speed internet. So I went download crazy during that time period, downloading as much as I could. You know, the internet at home was not strong enough for me, you know, to be downloading songs. And so I used to use this peer-to-peer program. And this is during the time period of LimeWire, Kazaa, like post-Napster. Napster had already kind of like been given up on. So I used a program called Aries, which is basically the exact same thing. And I would download anything punk I could find or read about or hear about. So I would just be like, I'm going to get this punk compilation. It's got like a ton of songs from bands I don't know. Oh, I've heard of this band. I'm going to download it. Because at the time, YouTube hadn't really taken off yet. And it didn't have much on it, even if it, you know, was active at that point. So you couldn't just be like, what's that sound like? And go there and listen to it. It was a lot harder to just kind of sample music, weirdly. So I would just download it. If it sounded interesting, I would download it. And it resulted in a lot of just like downloading, like, I know that name, download like 10 songs, like random songs from the discography, not albums. I don't think I knew how to download albums in that program. It was a really weird program. It made it more so like single MP3s populated more than albums did. But, so I downloaded the song Teenage Kicks. But this is also during the time period where people put the wrong names on things. And this was called a Buzzcocks song. And it was years before I learned that Teenage Kicks was not a Buzzcocks song. I was probably like, I want to hear Teenage Kicks. Where is it? It's not on Singles Going Steady. Oh, that's weird. Where is it? And then like Googling it and finding out it's an Undertones song. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was my like Undertones introduction. I was thinking it's the Buzzcocks. But in my defense, I do think they sound a lot like the Buzzcocks.
Yeah, for sure. Listening to this record, I was like, oh, this is classic pop Buzzcocks. I enjoy it more than like maybe the latter portion of the Buzzcocks discography.
Oh, I was going to say, like, out of the discographies, I think I like this Undertones record better than any one Buzzcocks album. If you're not counting Singles Going Steady. I personally don't because it's a compilation, but a lot of people do because of it was the first time people heard those songs, but in the US specifically. But
I think Singles Going Steady is so consistently enjoyable that I just consider it one of their records.
Yeah.
I want to have that one Buzzcocks record.
Yeah, because I don't really have one otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess opinions section. How did you enjoy it coming back to it?
I really enjoyed it. I think that it's very easy to maybe overrate it because it is really kind of unique for 79 in what they're doing. But I think it's really enjoyable record. I think that it's got a lot of great hooks and a lot of great, just a lot of great sing-along moments. I don't know if it's going to be something I come back to a lot, but I might come back to it more often than I have previously.
I loved it. I'd never listened to the record all the way through, so this was my first real attempt at it, and it just really works for me. It's doing a lot of just like the catchier side of punk that you don't get as much from the UK scene around this time. Like Stiff Little Fingers are one of my favorite bands ever, but even they're from Northern Ireland. And they're much harsher. I mean, but they were also going more for like an aggressive political, Clash influence thing. Whereas I think the Undertones just wanted to be the Ramones. Like a lot of leather jackets. The album cover is specifically them standing in front of a brick wall because they wanted to look like the Ramones. Like that was what they wanted to do. The very first video of the Teenage Kicks video is like they're all wearing leather jackets. And it's just like very clearly like, oh yeah.
Baby, what can I do? You know you drive me crazy when I'm looking at you. The summer's really here and it's time to come out. Time to discover what fun is about. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer. Keep on looking for the girls with the places all planned. The land on the beach is all covered in sand. Stretching out the long legs, lying in the sun. Playing on the beautiful, having fun. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer. Here comes the summer.
Yeah, this band is the archetype of just a garage rock band and everything that could mean. I feel like even the way that they're kind of outdated for the time period that they were making music just kind of lends that much more to that just garagey feeling of it just being like we're just playing dumb songs that we enjoy that are really fun and like almost to entertain themselves, which is really fun. It gives this record a kind of levity that you don't get from really any punk records in this time period. I mean, even by the late 70s, the Ramones are pushing towards harder sounds and a more aggressive presence, largely thanks to Johnny.
Yeah, that was like one of the things about them is that like they purposely wrote more songs about teen angst and love and like based heartbreak, like the kind of songs that the Ramones write about. It's also the kind of songs that the Buzzcocks write about. Like I always felt like the Buzzcocks were like the other one that kind of was taking the Ramones template a little bit. They added a lot more melody to their sound, so I think Pete Shelley's a better singer than Joey Ramone. Very just different vocalists, but technique-wise, you'd say probably Pete Shelley's probably a better singer. And Fergal is in the Pete Shelley like lane of vocals too. He has this like quivery affectation to his voice, but he doesn't have the tough guy, hey, we're the Ramones thing going for him, so he has to go a different way. But they got compared a lot to the Stiff Little Fingers because while they were both from Northern Ireland, like, the Undertones were not singing political stuff. I mean, it helped that they were all really young. I think they said one of the guitar players was like 18 when this record came out. So, like, they were kids. So, I mean, they may not have even, like, wanted to even talk about that kind of thing or care to talk about that kind of thing yet, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and then it just runs the risk of being just kind of like aimlessly reactionary.
Yeah, I felt... Did you say that you thought that this was like you want to overrate it, was the thing that you said?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just comes from its, like, relative obscurity.
Well, like, my listening to it was that it is an underrated record. Like, it's not as talked about as their contemporaries.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably ultimately is underrated. I think it's the kind of thing that you could oversell and have someone think, like, it's going to be really, like, revelatory, and it's really kind of just like, you know, the Ramones style of taking Beach Boys songs and playing them harder.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what it is. Like, it's nothing but that. So it's not going to be anything other than that. So I wouldn't want to misrepresent it.
Yeah. It does that. I think it's underrated because of when it came out. You know, it came out much later than the rest of the bands that sound like this. I mean, it's more in line. It's in the same part of their career as it was Stiff Little Fingers and UK Subs is Another Kind of Blues. Like, they had spent years playing these songs, but for whatever reason, they never got them together or in front of the right audience to get a record label deal. And it's why those records are like, man, this is good. It's because we're playing on it for a while.
Yeah, but they haven't been... I mean, other than Stiff Little Fingers, like, UK Subs is a really good comparison to make because I feel like while they're stylistically pretty different from each other, UK Subs and the Undertones have the kind of unifying element of being a little more outdated. Because I feel like Stiff Little Fingers, they had an anger and they had a political conscious aspect of their music that made them more forward thinking, I think. Whereas, like, UK Subs were doing, like, blues rock, you know, R&B influenced, you know, pub rock, just pub rock played harder. And the Undertones are doing, you know, pop music played by a rock band, you know.
Yeah,
by a punk band even.
They were influenced by Motown too. Like, they started in 74, so the type of stuff they were probably playing in that time period was standards and covers, and, you know, so they have that baseline. I bet they weren't doing pub rock, and that's probably what makes them stand apart a little bit. They're probably more doing 60s style rock, because you hear that on tracks on this record too. Yeah,
I think that's one of the things that is surprising to me about this record, because they, at least like the first time I listened to them, they kind of seemed like they would be a pub rock band by the way that they were kind of UK punk adjacent, but like maybe not properly categorized as punk. They came across to me as being like, well, is this going to be kind of like Dr. Feelgood or like Ian Dury or like, you know, a lot of that disappointing pub rock where you're like, you want it to be that thing that inspired UK punk, where, you know, like, well, this is where UK punk came from. And it's like, oh, it's not good.
Oh, this is just Eddie and the Hot Rods.
Yeah. I mean, I'll come to the defense of Dr. Feelgood for being, at least they had like that very aggressive angular guitar sound, but everything else that's like pub rocky about them and all of those other pub rock bands is like, oh, you guys are trying to do blues, but you're not good at it. You're not even like UK blues rock, like great musicians. You're just like sloppy drunks.
They were influenced by glam rock too, so that probably helps make that a little bit more distinct of a sound. I mean, I bet they even they're probably Kinks fans, which I hear a little bit of that in there too.
Yeah.
That's the power pop, I guess.
Oh yeah, like, T-Rex and the Kinks and all of that early 70s pop rock stuff definitely plays in here too.
So yeah, prior to this, they had only released the Teenage Kicks EP, which John Peel actually helped pay for because they had sent him a demo. And then John Peel would later say that Teenage Kicks is his favorite song of all time up until his death. So that's pretty important distinction to be called John Peel's favorite song, to have written that song. You're just going to live off that for the rest of your lives. There's some interesting stuff with this record. So the singles for the album were Jimmy Jimmy and
not a good single.
Alternate version of Here Comes the Summer. And so, yeah, Jimmy Jimmy, it's fine.
What are you doing? Male Model is right there. True Confessions. Come on.
I mean, I gotta get it. Wrong Way. I mean, Here Comes the Summer was a good choice, I think. But it's also so Ramones-y that it's because it even has the keys that the Ramones were doing. It's got a Rockaway Beach kind of vibe to it, and some rock and roll radio. It's a kind of cutesy song too. It's a little more saccharine than the rest of the record's lyrics are. Because Jimmy Jimmy's about suicide.
Yeah.
Which is weird. So, okay, Teenage Kicks had come out already, but there's some weird tracking alternate takes on the Spotify version of the record. So, the version of the album on Spotify includes the pre-album singles Teenage Kicks and Get Over You. They are not part of the original 79 record. They are on the 79 reissue of the same year. Also, the Here Comes the Summer on Spotify is the single version, which is a little longer, and sung by Fergal on the single, but it's actually sung by the drummer on the record, the original version. I pulled it up just to be what is this sound like? It's faster, and the keys aren't as it doesn't have as much lead into the keys. Same goes for True Confessions. This is also a keyboard version of True Confessions on this version, but it's not on the. It's frustrating because I feel the only way you're going to be able to hear the true original versions of some of these songs is to go get find a vinyl rip of the original 79 pressing, or there's probably CD versions or cassette versions too. It's just that annoying thing that Spotify tends to put the single versions of tracks on the albums because it's the one that people are more familiar with, especially in England. They're probably mainly familiar with the single versions. So it's a weird not the normal way this album sounded in 79 until the second half of 79 when they reissued it.
When I was young, I never wanted toys. Things like that were for little boys. My mama brought me clothes, my favorite song. 3 months out and making 61. I wanna be a male model. I wanna be a male model. I wanna be a model. A model. Read women's magazines for fashion trends. We'd say you know the prices they are pounds and pence. Reminds me that I can't afford to buy new clothes. I never get the chance to say I take those. I wanna be a male model. I wanna be a male model. I wanna be a model. A model.
But I feel they probably did put Teenage Kicks on this version on the record because it was it's Teenage Kicks. We have to have it on the record. I'm sure people were buying the LP hoping Teenage Kicks would be on it and being disappointed when it's not there. But they reversed that pretty quick. There's some other kind of accolades that the record has. So Melody Maker called it the number 6 best album of 1979. NME ranked it number 17 that year. And then in 1993, NME called it the 51st best punk record of the 70s, which is like, okay, what else is on that list? But Q Magazine in the year 2000 called it the number 90 greatest British LP. In 2006, Kerrang called it the 19th greatest punk album of all time. And it's included in the book, 1001 Albums to Hear Before You Die. Damien O'Neill still considers it their best album, which is fun, because they released like 3 more records after this, too. And it's funny that he's like, this is the best one, still. Speaking of like the different versions, so the album cover artwork changes between versions, too. So the original version is the cream colored background with like the ripped paper look, and then like the black and white photo of the band that they were like, we have to have a black and white photo. Like they specifically wanted that because of the Ramones. But then the same year they the label reissued it, and it's a full color photo, and it's like them. It's shot from above, and you can see like the concrete that they're standing on, and it's got these like color borders to them. But then there's even a third version, which is like still uses the same similar color photos for color borders, but it's like them standing in front of just a plain wall, and it's full color too. It's just like y'all couldn't decide what to do with this.
Yeah, the overhead shot one looks like it looks like the Who, My Generation album cover, like with the overhead.
Oh yeah,
but then with like the weird, like unnecessary primary color ordering, so that it's a punk record.
And it sucks because like the original version is the best cover, but for basically. It's funny because I was looking at the reissue covers, and like every time it got reissued after the original, they used the other color photo up until like the 90s. So it's like throughout the entire 80s, every reissue was using that color photo. And it's like that color photo is way more dated than the original black and white cover. My guess is at the time they were like, this looks more modern.
Yeah.
And the band was like, no, we want to look more classic. I pulled up a couple videos of the band playing. So I watched there's like an actual music video for Teenage Kicks, and it looks just like, like the Damned video did, with that weird style of filming that New Rose had. I guess because they're using actual film. And that's a fun video. I watched their Top of the Pops performance of Jimmy Jimmy, and they look like children. They are very clearly still very young.
Yeah.
But what's kind of cool is like, Fergal's got stage presence. Like he has an energy. Like he does this, like he like snaps to the music in a way that like the rest of the band does not look confident enough to be doing. But he's like really rocking. Like he's got a good stage presence. And I even found like there's so Top of the Pops is a show that the band miming to their songs because they have to play it. They have to play the single charting version of the song, but they want the band on there playing it, so they just pretend to be singing.
Yeah.
There's another show called Old Grey Whistle Test, and that's the show where they get to like play, and you can hear them. And there's a video of them doing 4 songs from the record. He has really good charisma on that, too. But my absolute favorite video that I found of them was a live video of them playing Get Over You, which it looks like it's around the same time. I don't have a year for it. They look roughly the same, so my guess is if it's not 79, it's like 80. And Fergal is smoking a cigarette the entire time he's singing. He has it in between his fingers while he's holding the microphone. And he actually looks kind of cool doing it. He looks like a baby Dylan Moran, the Irish comedian. It's a fun video. Like he has the lit cigarette the whole time, and he stops and takes like drags on it occasionally. But like whoa, you had to get that ciggy in. But he was working class. Like he was an electrician.
Yeah.
Before, and he had his own van that he used for work. But then they also used it to drive to the gigs. So like they're a working class band,
There's this great. I'm just looking at pictures of the Undertones. On Google now, and I just have seen a few pictures of him. He looks like almost like Guy Picciotto.
Yeah,
like lanky and like has a similar like haircut and has a similar stage presence from the looks of it too.
Yeah, he has a really good stage presence.
I mean, I think Guy was probably more erratic, but
And then they would release 3 more records and then break up in 83 over creative differences. Some of them would have other projects. Fergal has had a solo career too. He had one song that was a minor hit in the U.S. It was like number 75 was the highest it got. I didn't look it up to hear what it sounded like, but I think he was a bigger deal in the UK and in Ireland. The band reunited in 1999, and Fergal was offered, come on back, and he turned it down. So the Undertones are now fronted by someone named Paul McClune, who has been, playing with them since 1999. They have a bunch of shows in Germany coming up. Like, they're still an active band. They released 2 records with Paul McClune. So they're still ongoing band. Interestingly enough, I'm surprised Fergal didn't come back. That falling out must have been a little bit harder than.
Yeah, it might have been a little bit more personal than creative differences.
Yeah, but it's strange to be like, well, we got a new singer and we're going anyway. So I always find that weird. But it's also not that weird because when you look at all the writing on this record, everyone has writing credits except Fergal. Fergal has no writing credits on this record. And I don't know if it's just, I don't know why that is. I don't know if they maybe just took his name off of them. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Unless those writing credits are meant for the music side. But it doesn't it doesn't say anything about lyrics by in any Discogs listing I could find. It's a strange, which now is like, so he didn't write any of those songs? Lyrically?
Did he not write the lyrics? Did he not write the melodies?
Is this a Black Flag situation where Greg Ginn wrote all the lyrics? But even then, those records are still, I think, credited as Black Flag, not like...
Yeah, I mean, because all of the different vocalists of Black Flag had their own unique delivery, so they at least contributed that much. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. He doesn't have a writing credit on it, but who knows? But yeah, ultimately, I don't know. I think it was a pretty good pick. It's not an obvious one that someone was most likely going to choose. So yeah, I think it was a really enjoyable pick.
Yeah, I think it's still a record that gets a little overlooked. It's really fun, really enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm looking at I was looking at its placement on the chart, and we sort by popularity on here, and it's like number 22, which is a pretty respectable number. And I'm like, okay, what is it better than? There's stuff that I would say it's probably better than, but I also get why those records are more popular. Like, I get why Machine Gun Etiquette's more popular. There's some, like, that Two Boy Army record and that Chrome record. I'm like, are these really that more popular? Or the Raincoats record? Maybe the Raincoats. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, those bands have probably longer discographies.
Yeah. Yeah, I would put it in my top 5 of the year, maybe, though. At least out of those records. I don't know. I'd have to really, really dig deep, but I don't know. At least top 10 for sure, but very good record and very enjoyable. Any other final thoughts on the album?
I think that's everything.
Yeah. Well, cool. Did we win?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we did. It's a good choice.
I mean, it's not fair because I knew we would.
Yeah.
Picking this record.
Yeah.
But yeah, my previous feelings and opinion on this record were validated by revisiting it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because whenever we were going over the deciding portion, I was like, I'm just gonna only have one of us choose. Basically, make it like how we have let our guests choose. So only just one of us will choose. So on the next solo episode, I guess it'll be my turn to choose the one, I guess. But looking at it, I was like, what would I have picked to talk about? And I probably would have done the same thing of not choosing the most, somebody's going to pick that, type thing. And I maybe would not have considered choosing this album. I probably would have gone with something like Duty Free Now by Devo, just because I'm like, that's the follow-up that nobody likes, right? Let's dig into it, Or maybe that Slits record.
The Slits one was the one that I was close to picking that one because I really want to have someone pick that record for us, though.
Yeah.
And
I want it to
holding,
mean something.
I'm holding out on that happening.
But even then, like, there's that Stranglers record, The Raven. I've heard other Stranglers records since the one we covered, and I'm like, oh no, we picked the wrong one.
Oh yeah, I almost picked that one for the potential redemption.
Yeah.
But then I saw this one and I was like, let's do that.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't know. I want to do a Midnight Oil record, but maybe not their very first one, you know. I want them to figure out who they are before we talk about them.
Figure out what you do.
But yeah, I think that'll do it for us this week. Thank everyone so much for listening. Go rate, review, subscribe on all forms of the podcasting apps that you use. And we'll talk to you later.